Sorry, video cut out for just a moment. It goes up 1 unit to -5, and then down 1 unit to -7. So like I said, when you're looking at this graph right here, if you're like, what are you doing with these numbers? Just look at the graph. You can count it out yourself. 3, -5, and then down 2 more units would be a -7. All right, so let's look on the next page and we'll do a few more of these. Okay, so set 2, when you are given vertices or co-vertices or foci. All right, so we are not going to do this with foci. So we are not going to do any of these. And if you look down at the page, 8 through 11 are giving you foci to work with, and we are not going to do that. All right, so let's look at the top half of this page. So finding the center. So you can use a midpoint formula with either the vertices or co-vertices. Okay, so the vertices, the midpoint formula says the center is halfway in between these two. Okay, so center, we do the midpoint of these two. So the midpoint is you add the 2 x coordinates together, and then you divide by 2. And then for y's, you add the 2 y coordinates together, and you divide by 2. So this, when I add these together, I get 0, and 0 divided by 0, I'm sorry, 0 divided by 2 is still 0. And then these add to 0, divided by 2 is still 0. So that means that this one is centered at the origin. So down at the bottom here, I'm going to start writing down my equation. So centered at the origin means it's just an x squared, just a y squared, equals 1. And I'll figure out my denominators as I play around with some of these numbers. Okay, so we then need to figure out what is A and what is B. So use the vertices to find A. So here's how that works. The vertices from that center, so from 0 to -5, or from 0 to +5, that's the distance. Remember, that's the definition of A, is how many units apart those points are. So these two are 5 units apart, and these two are 5 units apart. So that means that A must be 5. Next, we can find the value of B. So use the co-vertices to find B. So now co-vertices, look at what's different about these, and it's the y value. So -2 to 0, +2 to 0. These are 2 units apart. These are 2 units apart. So that means B is 2. Okay, so now determine the direction of the ellipse to write the equation. What I want you guys to look at is what's different about the vertices and the center. Here it's the x coordinates that are different. So that means that this is going to go with the x coordinates. So look at the x. A squared is 5 squared. 5 squared is 25. And then look at the co-vertices. What's different about the co-vertices is the y coordinates. So that means we're going in a y direction. So B goes in the y direction. Here's the y spot. B squared goes in the denominator. 2 squared would be 4. So that is our equation for number 4. All right, let's do number 5. Very similar one here. So we can find the center by taking the midpoint of the vertices. So add the 2 x values together, 0 plus 0 over 2. Add the 2 y's together, -8 plus 8 over 2. And I think you can probably see that just like number 4, this one ends up centered at the origin. So we're kind of warming up a little bit. So x squared over something plus y squared over something equals 1. So look at my vertices. My vertices will find the value of A. Look at how many units apart these are. These two are 8 units apart. These two are 8 units apart. So that means that A is 8. And what's different about these points is the y coordinate. So that means A is with the y. So underneath the y, I do 8 squared, which is 64. Next, B, I get from my co-vertices. So look how far apart these are. -6 to 0, that's 6 units. +6 to 0, that's 6 units. And these coordinates that are different are my x coordinates. So that means I'm going 6 units in an x direction. So look under the x, I put my 6 squared there, which is 36. Okay, so now let's look at these ones. These ones are no longer centered at the origin. So we're still doing our midpoint formula to figure out where our center is. So midpoint of our vertices, we do -5 plus 1. So add the x coordinates together and divide by 2. Add the y coordinates together and divide by 2. So here this is -4 over 2, which is a -2. This is a +2 over 2, which is 1. So that's the center. Here's another thing I want to point out. You might be able to get good enough at these that you can just look and tell me what the center is. Notice the vertices share the same y coordinate, so the center must also have that y coordinate. And the co-vertices share the same x coordinate, so the center must also share that x coordinate. If you notice that pattern and you don't need to do a midpoint formula, I am a-okay with that. All right, so let's start the equation down here. X, and then for a -2, I have x plus 2 squared over something. My y coordinate is 1, so I have y minus 1 squared over something, and then always equals 0. All right, so now our A and our B are gonna be a little bit trickier for these ones. So look at the vertices. What's different about them is the x coordinate. So compare these. We're looking for how many units apart these are. -5 to -2, that's 3 units away. Same thing here. +1 to -2, that's 3 units away. And you can get that just by subtracting them. Like 1 minus a -2, that's 3 units. So A is 3 units. And we already noticed it was the x's that are changing. So that means the 3 goes with the x's, and I have to square it. So 3 squared is 9, and that goes with the x's. Then use my co-vertices to find B. So look at what's different. It's the y coordinates. And you want to see how different they are. So from 3 to 1 is 2 units. And again, it's just subtraction. Like 3 minus 1 is 2. And then this difference right here, 1 minus -1 is also 2. So that is 2 units in each direction. And what's changing is the y coordinate. So that means we're going 2 units in the y direction. So we put it with the y. 2 squared would be 4. All right, one final problem here. Our center, let's talk about that little trick I just mentioned with problem 6. So look at what the vertices share. The vertices share their x coordinate, which means the center must also share that x coordinate. And the co-vertices share a y coordinate, which means the center must also share that y coordinate. So one last time, let's start to set up this equation. My x coordinate is 5, so I do x minus 5 squared over something, plus, and then the y minus 1 squared over something is equal to 1. So last thing we need is the value of A and the value of B. So A I get from my vertices. What's different here is the y coordinate. So we want to see how many units these points are from the center. So 8 to 1, we just subtract that. 8 minus 1 is 7 units. And we can double check with this one. 1 minus -6 is also 7 units. So we are going 7 units in either direction, and we are going in a y direction this time. It's the y coordinates that are different. So A equals 7 goes with the y's. So it goes right here. 7 squared would be a 49. Last little piece is B. So B comes from my co-vertices. So we look at these points, and we want to see how far away they are from the center. So we just subtract. 11 and 5 are 6 units apart. That's 11 minus 5. And then 5 minus -1, just to double check. 5 minus -1 is also 6. So B is 6 units. It is my x coordinates that are changing. So the 6 goes with the x. And just make sure that for your formula you square it.